Here's a live look from our chopper of that school and surrounding area. Looks pretty quiet. We have crews on the way right now. We're hearing from a law enforcement source that one student has been shot at Wilmer-Hutchins High School. This is where these pictures are coming from. Now, this is in southeast Dallas, as we mentioned, right there off of I-20, I-45. And as you can see, there are tons of fire trucks out there. Dallas Fire Rescue, I know our crews are in communication with them to get the very latest on what's happening inside that school right now. But again, one law enforcement source has told us from the scene that one student has been shot. We're reaching out to several agencies to confirm that. And what's happening right now, school is obviously still in session as it's only 11 a.m. Dallas Fire Rescue officials confirm that shooting for us. Dallas police tell us they are searching for the suspected gunman at this hour. So this is a situation, again, we have multiple crews headed to the scene. I want to invite my colleague Morgan Young into this conversation right now as we're bringing you these live pictures.
Well, yeah, Dia, in the Investigate's office, anytime something like this happens, we're instantly reaching out to our sources, trying to figure out what's happened here, trying to figure this investigation out. My colleague Tanya Iser is on the phone with multiple sources, trying to get more information about this, and also trying to, get that expert analysis of this response of an investigation like this. Each of these cases is unique, but they're each time, and I hate to even say each time because we've done this multiple times. It's devastating, and it's devastating for the community. So we're just really working to get that information.
Again, these pictures coming to you live from our chopper above Wilmer-Hutchins High School, where we got reports just minutes ago that there was a shooting inside the school. We do know we have one student who has been shot, according to a source. We have our Rebecca Lopez now. Rebecca, tell us what your sources are telling you about this situation.
I have multiple sources that tell me there is one student that has been shot in the leg inside the G building, which is inside the school at Wilmer-Hutchins High School. That person has been transported. Also, they were looking for the suspect. I have two sources now that have told me that suspect is in custody. They've obviously locked down the school. I was speaking with sources that were on the scene as well, and they are guarding all the doors, obviously making sure all the kids are okay. This is obviously every time something like this happens, as Morgan was saying, unfortunately, it happens all too often. It is very frightening for the parents and the children that are involved in something like this. It is interesting because I was just talking to the police chief of DISD this week about what they were doing to try and make sure that all their metal detectors were working and different things that they were trying to do to get more security around the schools, even getting more rifles for officers on campuses. Right now, I believe they have like 16 rifles. They're looking to, unfortunately, they have to fortify these campuses. And so right now, what I am hearing, though, from multiple sources, one student shot in the leg. The suspect then ran out towards the, I believe, the field house, towards the football field. But that person has been taken into custody at this point.
You know, Rebecca, you already mentioned parents who may be seeing this play out on their screens right now. Have you got any indication of how long it's going to take to go ahead and clear and secure that building and get some of these kids out of there and home?
Yeah, sometimes it can take, as little as, a couple of hours, and sometimes it can take, a lot longer. It just depends. Right now they do, since it is not an active shooter and they do not believe that there's any more threat inside the school, it switched to, hey, we've got to find this suspect. And they sent DISD and DPD out, and DISD police actually took the suspect into custody. So they'll probably clear the school a lot quicker, but then there's witnesses that have to be interviewed and a crime scene that has to be processed. So it's going to take a few hours out there for police and law enforcement.
Last one I have for you, Rebecca. Do you have any other indication just of what the atmosphere is like, right, on this campus? It looks very still, especially for a Friday. What a contrast to be talking about a shooting inside of one of our local high schools on such a beautiful Friday.
Yeah, it was interesting because I was talking to some of my sources. It just sounded chaotic at the scene inside. It was, just kind of chaos, trying to get everyone cleared and making sure that there were officers guarding each door and making sure the shooter didn't come back in. That kind of stuff was happening as, children are, being locked down and students are being told not to leave their classrooms. And so it was very much chaotic inside the school. But as you know, now things have obviously calmed down since they do believe they have the suspect in custody.
Rebecca, is there any information on who the suspected shooter could be? Do they believe this could be a student, or was this someone who should not have been on campus?
You know, I have not gotten the suspect information at this point. I believe the student that was shot was a male student, 16 or 17 years old, so a teenager. And, it's hard to tell. But a lot of times when you have something like this happening in school, it is probably some sort of beef that they had with one another. You know, we're doing a lot of stuff on juvenile crime and how social media is playing an active role, and sometimes these students beefing with one another. Don't know if that's the case, but since there's just since it was one person shot, it would lead me to believe that perhaps that is going to be the case, that these people knew each other.
Rebecca, could you please let us know what next steps are in a situation like this? I know you said sometimes it can take a while to get the building secured and get children out and make sure those who need to be interviewed are interviewed by law enforcement there. But what are the next steps in a situation like this?
Well, they have to, like you said, they have to interview everyone. They have to process the scene. They're going to get shell casings. They have to see where, they've got to check the weapon, if they found a weapon on the suspect, to see if that weapon matches the ballistics on the scene. Obviously, interviewing the student that was shot. I believe that the student is going to be okay again, shot in the leg. Initially, there were reports of multiple shooters and an active shooter situation, but the shooter shot the person and then ran out of the school. So there's all just the processing of that scene, interviewing everyone. And then also, DISD will have to take a look at how this happened. How did a gun get inside the school? They do have metal detectors. I need to double check to make sure Wilmer-Hutchins is one of the ones that has metal detectors. But I'm told that pretty much everyone inside every school in DISD does have these metal detectors.
Our senior crime and justice reporter, Rebecca Lopez, there reporting for us as we bring you those live pictures from our chopper. Thank you for that important context. I know she's still going to be on the phone, still working her sources there at the scene to get us any other information.
And speaking of that information, I do want to bring in investigative reporter Tanya Iser, who I know I was actually sitting right next to her when she instantly jumped on this, calling her sources, trying to figure out what's going on here and really get the latest on this investigation. Tanya, what do you know right now?
Well, a lot of what I've heard is very similar to what Rebecca has heard. Obviously, what our understanding is one student's been shot in the leg, and that they have caught the shooter. But there's, as is often the case, there's so much that we don't know. How did he get the gun in the school? Where did he get the gun from? I mean, these are all going to be the things that law enforcement is going to be taking a look at in the coming weeks. And just as I've been watching this live look, what we're seeing is exactly what I would expect law enforcement to do. They have locked down the school. They're making sure that they made sure that the shooter couldn't get back into the school. And then we're going to be waiting to see what the process is for reuniting students with their parents. Oftentimes, and we saw this in the Mesquite case, they'll set up a reunification center and systematically reunite parents with their kids. And you can just imagine, I mean, I'm a parent, and the thought of your kid is inside a school when something like this has happened, it would be simply terrifying. And so it's sadly a scene that we see play out all too often, and schools, have had to develop a plan for how to deal with this stuff. And that's a sad state of affairs here in the newsroom. In many ways, we've also had to do that because we have, and the first things we're looking at is, are there more than one shooter? Is that person in custody? How many people have been shot? And so, thankfully, it looks like, from what we know about this one, that it's not going to be on the level of some of the other ones that we've seen. But it's certainly a sad state of affairs.
Tanya, you actually mentioned what the response looks like and that there's some steps that are taken in situations like this. But I think, to your point, for parents who are watching at home, to find out that one student was shot, the shooter was taken into custody, that's a huge response. What is standard procedure in a situation like this? Well,
obviously, again, they're going to lock down the school because they're going to want to prevent that shooter from getting back in the school. They're going to, they're going to have all those kids in their classrooms and, locking the doors. And they're going to be looking at school security, right? Again, how did this kid where did he get the gun? You know, did he buy the gun? Did he get the gun from a friend? Did he get the gun at his home? They're going to be systematically looking at that. And often what we'll see is an outside agency come in, frequently the Texas Rangers, or it could be a DPD, come in and do an investigation. Now, we don't know yet if that's what DISD is going to do, but that's oftentimes what happens is you'll see and beyond the police investigation, there's obviously going to be a look at should there be certain school security measures that are improved or enhanced. In the last legislative session, they passed new laws that added additional requirements that you had to have armed law enforcement officers or armed guards on every campus. And I know from the last time I had a conversation with someone that DISD has been in the process of implementing that, but it's a massive task to try to deal with these situations.
And you know, Tanya, you just talked about all of these efforts in schools, really everywhere, to combat situations like this. And I think one thing that's important to notice here, Dia, is that Dallas ISD is one of the districts that this school year implemented another safety measure of having clear and mesh backpacks for all students. I think previously they had been doing it for the older students. They extended that through K through 12. So that safety, taking those steps to avoid days like this one, to avoid things like this one, all of the districts in our area are doing these things.
And there's so much that still has to play out. We have to figure out, again, to Tanya's point and Rebecca's as well, it may take them a while to go ahead and clear the scene, collect all the evidence they need to. But a scary situation that a shooting could happen inside of a high school in the middle of the day. And now you see how still and how quiet. I think that's just such a contrast to what these kids are dealing with on the inside. Rebecca said, sources were telling her how chaotic it looked, but you can see police have done, a remarkable job from what we can tell, locking this down. And since we came on the air at 11, initially we didn't have any real indication if someone was in custody. We have now confirmed that someone is in custody, and that one student was shot in the leg and has been transported. We will certainly work to get the most updated condition on how that student is doing. Rebecca said it seems to be a teenager, but just a scary situation all the way around.
It is, and as we see so many of those units that are still sitting on school property, I don't know if you noticed a few minutes ago, one of them left the scene around the time that Rebecca was saying that the student who was injured was taken to the hospital. So we're seeing that slowly kind of trickle out, but still officers there on the ground. That's a huge campus, you can see. That's another thing to keep in, huge, surrounded by trees, and you just see those officers walking in that area. You see the entrances to those parking lots secured there with officer units, and you can just see that they are walking here, taking inventory of what they're seeing, and that just kind of goes in line with what Rebecca and Tanya were saying happens after situations like this to get everything they need.
To bring Tanya back into this conversation, Rebecca mentioned her sources tell her that it was a DISD officer who actually was able to get that suspect in custody. Do you think, Tanya, that this has to do with some of those safety measures that have been implemented that Rebecca was already doing reporting on?
Actually got him in custody somewhere off campus. So I don't know all the details of that, but just before I came over here to speak to y'all, my understanding was that they had identified who the suspect was, and they had tracked him to a location, and then they had made the arrest off campus. But to your point, there's so many things that we just don't know, right? And I think those, in a situation like this, everybody wants answers right away. And oftentimes the information is going to trickle in, and sometimes the information we get early on is not completely what it ends up being. Because when police officers are arriving on scene, they're trying to figure out, well, what happened? How did this happen? And so those are the things that we'll be, looking at in the coming days. But I just want to make a comment that when I was growing up, you might have to worry about, did somebody bring a knife to school? It never occurred to me, I don't really want to admit when I was in school, but it was a long time ago. And the thought of somebody bringing a gun to a school, it just was not something we ever considered. It just wasn't a thing. And so I feel for these kids, and I'm sure the district will have crisis counselors that will come out to talk to the kids, because kids are growing up today and they're having to do these active shooter drills and practice lockdowns and stuff, and it's just a whole different world from the way that I grew up.
We just got an update. Dallas ISD tweeted that all students and team members are safe at Wilmer-Hutchins High School. They have initiated their safety protocol. It's on your screen now. Police are still on site. You can see it in our live pictures there to ensure that the school remains secure. At this time, DISD is asking for everyone to refrain from coming to the campus as they try to limit access inside. It went on to say that parents are going to get a letter and some communication with more details later. Again, everyone is safe and they appreciate the support of Wilmer-Hutchins High School. So at least some sort of positive update there that the school is secure and the students who are inside are safe.